So I recently finished Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and this is one of the best games that I have played in a while. It's probably going to be my vote for Game of the Year, but that's mostly because I'm poor and I can't afford a Switch 2, so no Mario Kart, no Bloodborne 2, and no Donkey Kong for me. Clair Obscur is one of those games that you play and it reminds you why you like playing video games. It's also a game that reminds you how bad you can be at video games. But that's the beauty of it. It can be a roller coaster of emotions. Stories like the one in Clair Obscur help us not only escape reality, but when we finally hit that final end credit scene, we look back and we realize that the game actually helps us understand reality more. In a world constantly telling us to move on and push down our emotions and just completely forget about what makes us human, sometimes we need art to tell us that it's okay to hurt. And so today I'm going to be talking about the story of Clair Obscur, how grief can destroy a family and can also push us to make decisions that we are not ready to make. And so first, let's dive into the Descendants family. And please excuse my French. I took French for like 2 years in high school, so I think I'm pretty good with my French, okay? I don't want any criticism. The center of all the trauma in the game starts with the sacrifice of Verso Descendants. Verso made the noble sacrifice of helping his baby sister survive an arson attack on the family. But in making that sacrifice, he changed the course of the family's future more than he probably could have imagined. Interestingly, it's not Verso dying that causes all of the conflict in the story. It's what he left behind, his canvas. And that leads us to Aline Descendants, a mother trying to deal with the untimely death of her baby boy. She was so attached to her child that she was working herself to death just to keep the last part of his soul alive. Working herself into an early grave just to keep her son's one and only canvas that he made. Renoir Descendants, also grieving the death of his child and seeing his sickly wife slowly deteriorate, trying to do what he can as a father and save what's left of his family, he works his hardest to actually destroy the last memory of his son. Not because he hates the memory of his son, but because he wants his family to live on. He's lost one child, another child is completely mentally checked out, and he's watching his wife, the woman that he loves, die right before his eyes. And he cannot bear to see his wife and daughter go along with his son. And I alluded to them, but then we lead to the daughters, Alicia and Clea. I'm gonna be honest, Clea is just straight up mean. Like, she just blames Alicia and shows little sympathy for her sister's feelings. She just blames her sister for the fact that their brother is no longer here anymore, which is fucked up. And though we never physically see what happened, Alicia obviously blames herself for her brother's passing, and instead of trying to deal with the grief and trying to move on, she, as the same way her mother did, goes into the canvas, but she takes a different approach. Instead of preserving the canvas, she goes in and creates a different version of herself. A version of herself so that she can disassociate from the reality that she has to face. When you first start playing Clair Obscur, you're obviously on the side of the people in Verso's canvas. You have no idea of the full context of what is happening in this world. You just see a bunch of people watching their loved ones turn into rose petals and disintegrate like it's Avengers Endgame. I found myself rooting for Luna, Maëlle, who is just Alicia, Ciel, Gustave, Verso. I found myself rooting for all of them because at the end of the day, I wanted them to win. I wanted them to finally achieve what the other expeditions couldn't. But then you learn the truth of how the Paintress has actually been trying to help and warn people about how much more strength that she has until she's completely out. And the curator, the mysterious being who's been helping you all throughout the game, is actually trying to wipe your existence. But you also learn why both of them are doing what they're doing. And I know some people may disagree with me, but when I learned the full context of the situation, I was on Renoir's side the whole time. Well, I won't say the whole time. At first, I was like, you can't destroy the last thing that is keeping their son alive. Like, that is evil. To me, it would be like throwing out an old memoir of something to keep someone's memory alive. Like, I was like, I don't think that it is bad to keep the memory of that person alive, because sometimes they can help us get through grief. But then you see the effect that it is having, not only on the mother, but on Alicia, even on Clair. And that is where I found myself rooting for what really, I wouldn't classify him as the villain, but the villain in the story. I found myself thinking, if I were a father, watching my wife work herself to death, watching my daughter disappear into a fantasy land while my other daughter is just, I don't even know what's going on with her, I would probably go into the canvas and do the same thing. And that to me is why I find this story so powerful, because everyone's opinion is valid. Aline and Alicia are valid for wanting to keep Verso's memory alive. And Renoir is also right for not wanting his family to die. He's just a father trying to do the best that he can to hold his family together. And so all of this culminates to the end of the game, where you're presented with a choice. And I was already on Renoir's side, but I started to think from a different perspective. What would Verso want? The man who sacrificed himself in the first place. And to me, my interpretation would be that he would want them all to move on as well. He made that sacrifice for a reason. He made that sacrifice so that his sister could live on. He valued her life and her future more than his own. And if he were alive, I imagine he would do the same thing that the fake Verso does. Go to his child self painting the canvas and just let him go. And to me, it reflects so much of the reality that we all face when it comes to death and grief. The memory of those who have passed always lives on through their influence, their ideas, and the memories that we made with them. And as much as we fight to keep them alive, sometimes the best thing that we can do to honor them is to keep living. And so that leads me to my whole point that took me 8 minutes to get into, where I want to go and talk about how each individual character in my mind is representations of how we deal with death, because that to me is the overall theme of the story. Aline Descendre, in my eyes, is a perfect representation of people who obsessively preserve wanting to keep the memory of someone who has died alive. In real life, we'll do things like keep scrapbooks of them around, keep pictures of them up on the wall, keep their clothes so we can remember what they smelled like. Sometimes even keep voice notes or recordings so that we can just hear their voice one more time. All of these different mementos serve the purpose of making us feel like that person is still here. The pain of realizing that they are truly gone can sometimes be just too hard for some of us to bear. And that can lead us to keeping the memory of that person alive, even if it's at the cost of our own health or our own mental well-being. Because without that person, we feel like we are nothing. So why try to be something? Renoir, in my eyes, represents acceptance. Acceptance that death is a part of life, and acceptance that we have to move on, despite the grief we're going through. And I think a perfect example of this is the irony of what led him to wanting to destroy Verso's canvas. At the end of the game, he talks about how his wife is the one who taught him how to paint, and how his wife is the one who taught him about the wonders of painting and pretty much changed his life. She showed how intoxicating the canvas can be, and when he himself got stuck in a canvas, she was the one that pulled him out. And now he has to be the one to pull her out. That to me is the painful cycle that we all live, where we rely on our friends and family to save us from our lowest moments. And sometimes that means that we have to make decisions that may make people hate us, but we do it because we love them. An example of this could be having an intervention when you have a family member who you think is slipping into alcoholism, or being the friend who tells someone that their partner is abusive, even if they may hate you for it. We do this because we try to be the one who is mature or accept what is happening and takes it full force, but that doesn't make it easy. And that doesn't mean that other people can handle it the same way. Alicia is probably what I think is the most relatable character because she represents complete emotional shutdown. She carries survivor's guilt, blaming herself for Verso's death even though she was just a child. Her escapism is going into her brother's canvas and creating a version of herself that she wants to be. Confident, adventurous, determined, charismatic. Everything she wishes she could be in real life. And honestly, this hits differently in 2025. We're all doing this, retreating into social media personas, VR experiences, even video games where we can be the hero of our own story. We all, in our own ways, are escaping from our realities and creating versions of ourselves that we wish we could be. And the scary part is, it can be addictive. It can be like a drug. Sure, those 10 to 12 hours in fantasy can help numb the pain, but eventually you do have to return to reality, and that can make the reality feel even more unbearable. You have poured so much energy into perfecting a life that doesn't exist, while the real one falls apart around you. And now let's get into some of the members of Expedition 33. First, CL. CL easily represents self-destructive behavior. I've seen it with my own eyes where sometimes people dealing with grief just push themselves to unconsciously do things to sabotage their own lives. When CL's husband died, she swam into the ocean, pretty much to join him in death. She survived thanks to our friendly neighborhood Eskie, but her child didn't. And that's the cruel reality of self-destructive behavior. We often just want the pain to stop, but we don't think about how our pain creates ripple effects into those around us. There is no intent to hurt others or create pain in other people's lives, but it inevitably creates a ripple effect that just creates cycles of trauma that get passed down through generation after generation. And then there's Lune. Lune represents avoidance. She deals with the loss of her parents by becoming hyper-focused on her work. You learn through her story that Lune has always been passionate about music, but from a very young age, her parents put the immense pressure on her of fulfilling the duty to defeat the paintress. And when they died, Lune carried all of that weight with her. I feel like this is very prevalent in Western culture where we deal with trauma and we deal with grief, but we just drown ourselves in work, drown ourselves in all different kinds of distractions that make us feel productive, but in reality, we are being destructive towards the self. We are destroying the version of ourselves that we want to be and creating a version of ourselves that we should be or feel that we should be. And Gustave, I mean, he isn't in the game long enough for me to really build an opinion on him. Thank you, Charlie Cox, for those 4 hours that you did in the booth. But I would say that if there's anything that Gustave can represent, he represents the harsh reality that sometimes the best of us go way too soon. Clair, I mean, she's just an asshole. I don't know what more you want from me. I loved playing Expedition 33. One, because it taught me that I am terrible at parrying, but it also had a very compelling story that tackles such complicated issues that we deal with in life. I mean, this is the first game in a while that has got me thinking about life and death, and I don't know, that's kind of weird. I truly do hope that Clair Obscur wins Game of the Year, but I do know in my heart of hearts that inevitably it's going to probably go to Death Stranding 2 or Donkey Kong, but Monkey Bonanza? Super Monkey Ball? I don't remember the name. But I want to end this video off with this. In an industry where every AAA game is chasing their billion-dollar live service cash cow that they can milk until the end of time, which often ends in layoffs when the game inevitably flops, here comes a $50 AA game from a lesser-known studio using Unreal Engine 5, and it's getting universal praise and is selling very well. If there is anything learned from Clair Obscur, I hope that Clair Obscur serves as an example in the gaming industry of what happens when you give developers time and money to make something that they are passionate about. I am enjoying the indie renaissance we are in. However, every game does not have to be at opposite ends of the spectrum. It doesn't have to be some big billion-dollar AAA game or some game made by 5 people in a warehouse. I think there's something poetic about a game potentially winning Game of the Year where the main theme of the story is letting go. In an industry where everyone is trying to make games that live forever, endlessly pumping resources into them even when it's destroying the people making them, sometimes the most powerful experiences in life are the ones that know when to end.